So I'd just like to welcome you along to the Inclusive Behaviours and Best Language workshop or webinar. Delivering tonight, my name's Shona Malcolm. For those that don't know me, I work for Scottish Athletics as the Officials Development Officer. And delivering our session tonight is Pamela Robson, and Pamela is our National Disabilities Pathway Officer as well. Pamela's been with Scottish Athletics for the last 2.5 years. In the disability side, but before that she has 15 years experience working with disability sport Fife. For those who are involved in disability will know Richard Brickley, and Pamela's worked closely with Richard in the past years. So that's Pamela's background in disability. So we will have a chance at the end for questions. Again, I'll keep an eye on the chat. So if anyone does want to put anything in the chat, if they don't want to ask a question, I'll keep an eye on that and we can bring that in. But at the end of the presentation, there'll be a chance for some questions as well. So I'm just going to pass over to Pamela and she'll take us through the presentation. Okay, Pamela?
Okay. Hi, thanks, Shona, and nice to see so many of you on screen. Let me just go back. I've realised that I've started at the end of my PowerPoint, so that's a really good start to the evening. Yeah, so as Shona says, I'm the Disability Pathway Officer for Scottish Athletics. Got a fair bit of experience in competition, but by no means am I coming on telling you that I know best. I'm learning every day as well. I'm giving you like the best practice that I can sort of talk about at the moment. But I really don't want you to think that I'm, criticising what's already been done, because there's some amazing things being done in competitions across the UK. And actually, you notice it when you go further afield to more international competitions, just how great the officials are and the competition opportunities are in the United Kingdom. So tonight, I just really want to talk about the inclusive competition environments, because even in the last 2.5 years, I would say, since I've been at Scottish Athletics, I feel that competitions across the board are far more inclusive than they used to be. Athletes with a disability now don't just have to go to disability sport competitions. Most or majority of competitions are now integrated. I know our Scottish champs are all integrated. All our competitions run by Scottish Athletics, but I know like across the country you've got youth development leagues, you've got club champs, that sort of thing, and they tend to be integrated much more than they were. So I think for you guys as officials, I'm sure you've worked with disabled athletes in the past, but it might be that there's more and more in the future that you're going to be working with. So just really a wee chat tonight. Keep it as informal as possible. Please let me know if you've got questions or note them down. We can chat at the end. I just want to recognise that I'm working in partnership with Scottish Disability Sport with this. A lot of the sort of facts and information from this have come from their UK Disability Inclusion Training that is rolled out across the 4 home nations. So anyone that's done the UK Disability Inclusion Training might have seen wee bits of this before, but they certainly informed a lot of our information. So as I said, competitions I feel have a much more inclusive feel about them. You see seated throwers, you see ambulant athletes, all in amongst the mainstream athletes, which is fantastic. But recent research across sports, so I'm not just talking about athletics here, but across sports, people with disabilities are still really underrepresented within mainstream sport or within sport in general. And they looked into the main barriers to this, and the main barrier still is attitude, people's attitude. So it might be the attitude of the coaches, it might be the attitudes of the parents or the actual participants, it might be the attitudes of the competition provider or officials or whatever, but attitude is still the main barrier. So I think the point I'm wanting to get across on this isn't big changes that need done. It isn't big costly bits of equipment and ramps and things like that to be more inclusive. It's just a bit of a can-do attitude, like we can make this work, or how can we make this work safely? So you can see some of the other challenges to inclusion in sport in general, but for me, I'm always staggered by the fact that it's still attitude that's the main barrier. And as I say, it's from both sides. It's from the participant side and from the provider side, but I think that's one that we've got the ability to change, and just coming on webinars like tonight is hopefully starting to do that kind of thing. So I think for me, the main thing during a competition, we'll talk slightly about classification later, because you may have come across athletes that will have like a T20 or F37 classification, and there's a lot of classifications within disability para-athletics, and that's really as we start moving up the pathway a little bit. But for your sake, and actually for anyone involved in competition, the main thing that you need to know is that there's divisions within disability sport. So we talk about athletes with a physical disability, athletes with a learning disability, and athletes with a sensory disability. So it doesn't really matter if they're a T31, T32, whatever. We're talking about athletes in that grouping. We division them into 3 specific groups. So within the physical disability group, we could have athletes who are ambulant, so they can walk or run, but have a physical impairment, or athletes who use a frame or wheelchair to do athletics. Okay. Within the learning category, so it's athletes with a learning disability. Again, as we get up the pathway, we look at IQ and all the rest of it to see if they can get classified. But actually, in the majority of competitions we all run or support at, it's just athletes who have a difficulty with their learning that are included. And then finally, sensory grouping. So it's athletes who are blind or have a vision impairment, or athletes who are deaf or have a hearing impairment. And that's really the kind of terminology that we use around it as well. Keep it simple and keep it athlete first. So we talk about the athlete first and then their disability after it. I think what we also just need to be a wee bit mindful of is, as much as we division them according to whether they've got a physical, learning or sensory disability, there are lots of unseen secondary hidden conditions that may go alongside that. That might just have an impact on them on competition day as well. So maybe on the autism spectrum disorder. So doesn't necessarily mean that they've got a learning difficulty. There's only 50% of people who are on the autism spectrum who actually have a learning disability. The other 50% are average or above average IQ. So, you know, they might just have different support needs. Diabetes, epilepsy, asthma, you might never need to worry about that, because if everything's under control and they're not having a asthma attack or epileptic fit or whatever, then it's not disabling them in any way. It would only be if they have, you know, an attack or something during competition. But it's just good to be aware that these other things can often come alongside a physical, learning or sensory disability. That makes sense so far? Yeah, thanks. I can actually only see, I think is it Brian that's got no name on his screen that's showing him? Yep. I can only see Brian, so I'm taking all my cues from you, Brian. So
all right, okay. I'll nod
in. Okay, so within any mainstream competition that you're officiating at, because of what I've just spoken about, you could have any of these athletes within your competition, and you might not know particularly much about it. They might not need a great deal of support, but you could have athletes with a speech and language challenge, with vision loss on the autism spectrum, hearing loss. Oh, got 2 vision losses there, that's fine. Athletes with a learning disability or with a physical impairment. So it can be a challenge, and I know like you are all so tight on times and following, you know, the procedures and the timetables and all the rest of it. And so someone, you know, come in that's got a speech and language challenge, it might be really difficult to manage within the time. So I'll share, once I've finished the presentation, I'll share with you what we do in Scotland, but we've got an athlete assistance form. Now, you may have that in other home nations. I'm not saying by any means we are leading the way in this, but we have forms that athletes, if they have any additional support needs, any disability at all, they can fill out the form, detail the support they need, and then it has to be into the competition team. I think it's the Thursday noon before the competition, but again, I'll share this with you at the end. And so that just allows the officials or the lead official to get information on what support this individual is going to need, that they might be coming with a coach to the start line because they need a little bit of guidance, or, you know, they might have an aide at the start. And so it's just being forewarned and just expecting it, because I appreciate the hectic, busy timetables you've got. But if you already know that this is coming up, then, you know, you can be ready for it. My photos are literally just to demonstrate some of the amazing athletes that we work with. So I'll just quickly go through them. So the athletes at the top, young lad Cammy, who is completely blind. He had full vision up until he was about 11 years old. Went to his bed, had a virus in his brain, and wakened up with absolutely no sight and won't get any sight back at all. It's fantastic. He's running there with a guide. They've got a fantastic relationship, and he runs in mainstream competitions, but he obviously needs an extra lane for his guide and a little bit of support. Carter on the bottom left, he's an athlete who is on the autism spectrum. Carter is more than capable of being pretty much self-sufficient throughout the whole day, unless timings get changed. Timings get changed, he just needs a little bit more explanation. Not a big deal, he just likes to know why. So, you know, that sort of thing. It might just be a quick, we're running a little bit late, but that's because, I don't know, someone fell, or, you know, just a little bit of explanation, and that's absolutely fine. So it doesn't need to be a big deal. And then Christina, the young lady, she is deaf. She has a little bit of hearing, but mainly relies on lip reading. So she needs to see my face when I'm talking to her, and she needs to see my hand actions if I'm starting her, either with a flag or a tap on the shoulder. So again, if you're forearmed with information, or we've got an athlete with a hearing impairment or hearing loss, you'll know that you might need a flash light. I know that's not a technical term, Shona, but a light, a flag, a tap, something like that. But just being forearmed with the knowledge, I think, is really helpful. Just really for your information, you'll notice that I'm using the word impairment a lot. So there's the definition of impairment. I'll let you read that, but basically that's what we use in sport. When we're talking about para-athletics, we use the word impairment. So once you start moving up the pathway a bit, it's a physical impairment, a sensory impairment, and intellectual impairment. Okay, so that's just purely, if you hear me swapping between disability and impairment, those words are kind of, you know, interchanged. And that's basically all I'm talking about. Okay, now the next two slides, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. This is purely to prove a point that classification, so that's when you're divisioned even into smaller groups within disability sports. We spoke about athletes with learning disability, physical and sensory impairment. This is bringing it down even more to make sport fair. Fair for all disabilities and all abilities. So I'm not going to read through them. I'm just literally going to let you know that there are loads. This is just page 1 of 2. An athlete with intellectual impairments, that's a learning disability, they're a T20 or an F20. So if they're on the track, it's a TF20. You may know that. I'm sure you do. So we've got so many different impairment types and classifications that it's almost impossible to memorize every single one of them. So it may be that you get information that's got the classification type on it, but it's probably just as helpful for you to know, is it physical, is it sensory, is it learning? I'm happy, I've got these tables that I just sort of typed up for my own information. So it's all taken from British Athletics, World Para Athletics, but I just find it quite easy to look at it this way. So if any of you want a copy of this, I can copy and paste it and send it over afterwards. So as I say, there's loads of different classifications, but don't get too caught up on it. The main part you need to worry about is athlete with a learning disability, athlete with physical disability, and athlete with sensory impairment. Hopefully I've not bamboozled too much with the figures, and is anyone familiar with the classifications? Few nods? Yeah, as I say, apologies, I don't know what competitions or what level you've been you've been officiating at, so this is just kind of taking it straight back. So within each of these divisions, so the physical, learning, sensory, there's going to be a spectrum. Did someone have their hand up to talk, or was it just to say that they were familiar? Just familiar. Perfect. So I'm just taking.
Barbara had her thumb up. So
oh, perfect. Sorry, I just saw a wee flash on the screen.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the pictures on the screen. So these are two Scottish athletes, Gavin Drysdale and Ross Patterson. Both competed from grassroots level, trained within clubs in Scotland, competing the club champs or Scottish champs, that sort of thing. But both competed at international level as well. They both have cerebral palsy. So as you can see, Gavin runs with a frame. Gavin has speech and language challenges and needs a high level of support. He's a frame runner. A class athlete but has completely different support needs when it comes to competition. He'll need someone helping him to the start line. He'll need someone to set up his blocks. He'll just need someone keeping him right. Once he starts running, like, it's phenomenal, and he'll need nothing from anyone. He'll just run his race, and that would be great. But there is a higher level of support. Ross Patterson at the bottom, he's got cerebral palsy, but he's only affected, he's a hemiplegia, so affected in one arm, one leg, but quite mildly. The only support he really needs is, well, two things: someone to tie his laces at the start. So a coach often comes on and does that, but if he's not got a coach there, he might ask an official. And he does his blocks and everything himself, but he has, it's almost like a water bottle. Some of you that have seen him in competition will know, it's like a water bottle on its side, because he can't do the tripod start with his fingers on the line. So the arm that's affected with cerebral palsy, he has like a water bottle that he holds onto on the line, and it's been okayed by like World Para-Athletics and stuff. He's used at high level competition, and it's just a case of someone at the start line picking it up for him once he's off. So it just shows you, you know, you might get information that you've got someone who has a physical impairment, who has cerebral palsy, but actually they could have massive different scales of, you know, support needs. So again, I'll share the form that we use that just gives us a little bit more information, just specifics on what they need support with on competition day. The next two parts maybe aren't quite as relevant, but similarly, sorry, I'm going back to minimum and severe. Someone with a vision impairment, they might have enough sight that you don't really need to do anything. If they're in an inside lane or an outside lane, that might be enough. You know, they'll hear the starter and they'll get there okay, but you might have someone like Cammy that I showed you earlier. He needs to run with a guide and he needs positioned on the start line.
That's the wait times.
What was that, sorry? No.
Do you have someone with a question? No?
No, okay, that's totally fine. Yeah, so just being aware of that sort of spectrum, you know, it's easy to have preconceived ideas depending on who you've worked with before and what experience you've got. You know, we all do it. So it's just being aware that although someone's got cerebral palsy or a vision impairment, they could be on that spectrum. The next two I'm not going to worry about too much. Someone might have acquired an injury, so you know they might have actually been an athlete previously, mainstream athlete, but they've suffered an injury and they're now a para athlete. So you know things can change, or they maybe had no hearing impairment before and now they do. So yeah, just being aware that things can change, and also that conditions are progressive, and probably a lot of you see a lot of the same athletes year on year come into their competitions. So, you know, if they've got something, muscular dystrophy or, you know, another progressive condition, that the support they needed last year might not be the support that they need this year, and just keeping an open mind about that. Okay, let me just move on. Okay, so I've just here looked at sort of 5 of the different impairment types, possible implications for competition and how you might be able to help. So if you're quite happy, I'll run through them. I'll not spend lots of time. It's just examples, just experiences I've had. It's not an exhaustive list, but it just give you an idea. So we've spoken a little bit about cerebral palsy, so or other neurological conditions. So maybe someone's had a stroke or brain injury. So they may be unstable in the start line. So if they're holding at the set position for a while, they might have involuntary movements and they might actually twitch or move. And I know that's a difficult one because you're not wanting anyone to false start, but it's just really thinking about if you have held them for a long time due to whatever circumstances, they might just need a little 2-minute breather before they, you know, start again. Might have a speech impairment, might be difficult if they're trying to give you some sort of explanation of the help they need, but at that point that's when you call on coaches or whoever's there to support them. And as I said with Ross, they might just have an alternative start position. Some athletes have one hand on the line and one hand back because they can't physically get on the line, but yeah, it's just sort of depending on the individual. And the how to help part is probably very similar in lots of them, is ask what support they need. So if that's prior to the race or prior to the competition, then brilliant. I realise I'm talking a lot about the track here, not so much about throwing, but I don't know why I'm doing that. It can apply to both. Ask what support they need. They might have support equipment. So if we've got, seated thrower, for example, they might come with their throwing frame. And again, we all know the implications that has on the time to get it set up, to get the tie downs set up and get the frames in the right position. But just really listening to them and their coaches to get it right. A vision impairment, so again, it's a spectrum. They might only need an inside or an outside lane, or maybe the middle lane's better, but they can often tell you that. They might need just guided to the start line. So I had a girl last year, needed someone to guide her to the start line, and then I needed to be about 10 metres past the finish line because she would have kept running because she couldn't see the line. She just ran until I was able to shout stop. And they might have a guide runner, so you might need another lane. So again, it's just clear verbal, easy for me to say clear verbal instructions, and I'm getting tongue-tied. Clear verbal instructions. You can offer to guide them, like to and from the race. I would never assume that they need guidance, but offer if they want it, then, you know, offer an arm kind of thing. Yeah, and just really going with the information you've got and being there to help. Learning disability, some of the possible implications might be just a bit of lack of focus. You might be giving them instructions or, oh, Shona, I don't know how many times we've lined people up in order for lanes. You know, at our disability sport competition, you line them up in order, you say, stay in the lane, you turn around to see if the starter's ready, and they've all kind of scattered off and they're out of position again. So that's if I was in a competition that was just for people with disability. But similarly, if it's a mainstream competition and you've got one or two athletes with a learning disability, you might just need to sort of bring them back in. They might just need that wee bit extra instruction. Again, they might have a wee bit difficulty understanding the instructions, so just say less. Just kind of guide them, demonstrate where they want to go, show them where the other athletes are, and they can copy. Because sometimes, less words is so much better. And just, having a clear visual. They might need support to or from race, but I would imagine that would probably come from a coach or a support person. But just if they were looking a wee bit lost from call room to start line, just give them a little G along so they know where they're going. Spoke a little bit about hearing impairment. They might lip read. They might be able to unable to hear the start signal. And if there's a false start, they might not hear that as well. So it's just having like any track officials aware that if the gun goes again for a false start, they're probably not going to hear that. So you're going to have a visual kind of further up the line. So it's just being in line of sight, using a flag, light, tap, whatever is most appropriate for yourselves and for the athlete. And finally, just my last sort of demonstration of possible impairments is a limb impairment. It might be someone who's amputee, arm, legs amputee. They might, again, be a bit unstable at the start, depending on, if it's a single leg or if it's an arm, they might need a little bit of support there. They might be wearing prosthetics or blades. We had an athlete in Scotland that was running double leg amputee on running blades and was running an 800 metres. And we had to really think about where he was going to be positioning to begin with, because his legs swing out to the side and we didn't want him to clip it. Well, he didn't want to clip anyone. He was really aware that he takes quite a wide stride. So it was just thinking about the starting position and making sure it's safe. And obviously they could also be using wheelchairs or frames whilst they're doing their sport. And then it's just, again, thinking about if they've got wheelchairs and frames, how many is in the race? Can they stay in their lane? Where should the chair be to start, and that kind of thing. So yeah, these are just examples, just quite generic examples of just different considerations that you might have to have when you've got athletes with a disability. All good? Okay. So I think the bit I said earlier about communication when we were talking about someone with a learning disability, I'm just going to emphasise that again, because all of us take on information differently, not just people with a disability. So it might be that the athletes with the disability just take that information on a little bit differently. You might just need to adapt. As I said earlier, often like a demonstration, I don't mean you demonstrating like racing or throwing, but just like walking them to the start line or pairing them up with another athlete if they're happy to do it, and just having that visual rather than it all being about words. And and it's very much open to interpretation. I know sometimes I've given individuals who are maybe on the autism spectrum or have a learning disability an instruction that I think is clear and concise, and they've interpreted it completely wrong, or I've not put it across in the right way for them to interpret it correctly, and I've had to rethink and give that the information in a slightly different way. So that's probably for me the challenging part, is to make sure that I'm catering for everyone's communication styles. So it's about giving and receiving information, obviously. So, you know, you're trying to get them into the correct pool for their long jump, or into the call room, that sort of thing. But it's just really picking up on what they're giving back to you as well. You know, are they understanding what you're saying? Are they following exactly what you're doing? And that doesn't need you to verbally check that with them. That's just you watching, which I'm sure you do with all competitors anyway, watching, making sure they know what they're doing, but understanding they just might need that little bit extra support. Okay, so a little bit about terminology. Now, this is very much from Scottish disability sport, but it's pretty similar across the UK. Yeah, it's across the board. So the terms we recommend, there's a whole paper on this from Scottish Disability Sport. Again, I'm happy to share it out, but I've taken out the main points that are probably most applicable to yourselves. So we talk about mainstream sport and disability sport, try and avoid able-bodied or non-disabled. We just generally use I don't think they're particularly offensive, it's just maybe not the most inclusive language. I know some athletes who have a disability, when we talk about able-bodied athletes, they say, but my body is able to compete, my body is able to be an athlete. So the terms mainstream sport and disability sport is probably the terms that we would prefer to use. Again, it is athletes first, so it's an athlete with a physical impairment or an athlete with a physical disability. So that athlete may have cerebral palsy or spinal injury. So it's not the cerebral palsy athlete, it's the athlete who has cerebral palsy. Okay, so it's just that small change just makes all the difference, just having an athlete first, and then talking about their condition if it's needed to be talked about. Athletes with a learning disability, and again, we use the word intellectual impairment when we're referencing parasport, kind of a bit more of a performance level. But yeah, it's just to give you that awareness. And again, it's an athlete with a visual impairment, or as a blind athlete, an athlete with a hearing impairment, or as a deaf athlete. Okay, so that's just the recommended terms. Again, I'm happy to send these out. These are taken straight from a paper. They're not my opinion. But what I would say is, as much as I've given you recommended terms, don't get too hung up on language. Don't worry about the name of someone's condition. Is it dwarfism? Is it achondroplasia? Don't get too hung up on the words. It's more about just being participant or athlete focused. Okay, if you're talking to the athlete, you're trying to support them, the language isn't going to be a huge deal. If you're trying to be appropriate and respectful, then that's the main thing. And the athlete should get that from you. None of us know the correct terminology for everything, and things change and evolve. And it might just be that the athlete you're talking to, they've got a different preference for how they want their disability to be described. So I think if we always make sure it's athlete first, then we talk about their disability or impairment, and we ask how they can be supported. So it's not like, what's wrong with them? It's, how can I support them? You know, it's taking the positive aspect first and looking at the athlete first. And if unsure, ask the athlete, ask the coach that's with them, the parents. Like, I genuinely ask questions all the time. I want to learn more, but I want to make sure I get it right for each individual. So ask if it's colleagues, you know, maybe someone's had experience in that area before, but just ask if you're unsure. And again, being appropriate and respectful is basically the biggest thing you can do, and there shouldn't be any issues. Okay, so this is just my part in words before we open up for questions, because I do genuinely think these things are the most important. I could go through a list of terminology of words for different impairments, but I genuinely think these 5 points are the most important. Be proactive rather than reactive. So if you're at a competition that you know there's going to be athletes with a disability there, just try and find out how you can support. As I say, I'll share the form that we use. So just try and be a wee bit proactive, or maybe you'll just spot someone that you think actually they look like they just need a little bit extra support. Just offer it. or just be open to it anyway. Genuinely, a positive attitude goes a long way. Yes, working with athletes with a disability does throw up some challenges. Like, there's no two ways about it. It makes you think differently, it makes you practice differently. But being positive and having, I said earlier, like a can-do attitude, right, okay, let's see if we can make this work, and let's sort of get everyone on board, and let's try and help. Just being positive, and if it, you know, something messes up your timings by a minute or two, yeah, it's not ideal, but we've managed to include that athlete in a race and a throw and a jump, and that's going to have a bigger impact than the 1 or 2 minutes that we've lost, kind of thing. So just being positive and open to including someone with a disability. Have an open dialogue with the participant. It's not something that they should come there being embarrassed about. Being an athlete with a disability is very well respected. It's very common these days. And across the UK, the environments are a lot more inclusive. So have an open dialogue. The individuals will probably appreciate you saying to them, is there anything I can do to support, or is everything okay, kind of thing. And small changes can have major impacts. Like, genuinely, just that extra bit of human touch with someone can just make the world a difference. It can make the change from an athlete feeling like they've been a pest, been a burden, that things are difficult, to them actually feeling like they completely belong and that they're achieving. So just little changes make huge impacts. And genuinely, not to sound too corny, but you are important, and you are the ones that will make difference. You're the ones that are there on competition day where nerves can be high, you know, stress can be high, but it's you guys that are dealing with all athletes, not just athletes with a disability, and it's you guys that can make the difference. So, like, even just being here tonight, I think it's the start of you making a big difference to the athletes and the competition providers even that you're working with and supporting. And that's just a photo of my 2 athletes, because there's total bundles of joy and they keep me on their toes every week, and I thought it was a nice wee photo to leave you with. So I'm going to stop sharing just now, and I've talked at you for half an hour, and I think that's long enough for anyone to listen to my voice. If you want, I can share the athlete assistance form very quickly and then open it up to questions. Would that be? And as I say, this is by no means like this is the only way to do it. This is just the way we're doing it at the moment. So you'll see that 2 seconds. So this is our Scottish Athletics one, but I know like clubs and things have adopted this approach because our athletes within Scotland are so used to this now, and I think we're getting more and more in, Shona, aren't we? You know, they're getting better used. So request for assistance, it's not something that they're going to request and get refused. It's just literally to let us know. They've had it in on 12 noon before the Thursday of the competition. They get emailed back to ourselves, or if it was getting used like in a club comp, it would be back to whoever's organising it. Competition name, date, athlete name, classification or impairment. So at that point, they could put in T47, or they could put in physical disability, ambulant, or whatever the name of their condition. But at least then we know what the disability sort of category is. Their event and time, if they know it. And this bit is, for me, the important bit, the assistance required. So we just encourage them to put in there whatever assistance they need. If it's someone walking with them at the start line, if it's, you know, whatever part of it, that's the kind of the detail that we need. If they're bringing an assistant to the start line or into call room, we like to get their name so we know who to expect. So it's not just a random person wandering into a competition. We need to know that beforehand. And just their email address for any pre-event information and their phone number. So yeah, that's kind of what we use. Yeah, chaperones are granted access to the warm-up area, call room and competition sites as applicable. But again, we usually like that detailed on the form. So that's what we use. I'm pretty sure we would be happy to share our format if anyone, you know, wanted to use a similar, even tweak or change, that kind of thing. But I'll stop talking there and open to any questions.
So I'd just like to say thank you to Pamela for that presentation. So does anyone have any questions for Pamela at the moment? Any burning questions?
Stunned you all in silence. I like it.
Oh, it was a very good presentation, Pamela. It was clear and came across well. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that's great. And as much as obviously we work up in Scotland, we're very open to supporting our colleagues as well. So if there was anything, you know, that we could support with, just let me know.
Okay.
Shona, you might kill me for saying that, but yeah.
No, not at all. Charles has got his hand up. Charles. Do you have a question, Charles? Or you can put it in the chat. You just have to take your microphone off. Mute. Okay, if we'll hold that and see if Charles.
Oh, his PC's playing up. That's fine.
Okay. Okay. So as I say, thank you to Pamela. I mean, I don't know if that's the kind of thing you were looking for today. The other thing that we need to bring in is this is the WPA rulebook. So there is a separate rulebook. Some of you may have this already. Some of you might not, but there is a separate rulebook for para athletes. And if you are working with them a lot, then it is worth a copy. You can download it off the WPA website. And that's probably the best place to get it when it gets updated. I'm old-fashioned. I prefer a hard copy. If you're lucky enough to know John Mason, you might be lucky enough if he's got any left to purchase one from him. But they haven't printed a lot this year, unfortunately. I will say if for officials, because if most of these are officials, it is easier to read than the UK one and the World Athletics one. So it is a bit more easy to read. But it is there, so if there's any questions, this gives you what the rule changes are. So when you are integrating athletes within your competitions, you can refer to the rule book for the changes that you need to make within the competition for those different rules.
Can I answer Charles' question? I've just seen it in the chat. So Charles, the difference between an assistant and a chaperone in the form, I don't think there is a difference. I think we've just odd consistency in the language. Unless, Shona, you can tell me differently. We maybe need to update that. No, we've just, at international level, they're called assistants. So we've just kept the word assistants just to keep it. And then I think at the bottom we've got chaperone, so it's maybe just that it says athlete chaperone. Right. We've just not updated that bottom, but that's a 2022 version, so we've not updated that, but that will be done this evening. Okay.
Could I just ask a question then, please? Of course. I found that very helpful, but I'm slightly perturbed, if you like, that I've never come across any, I'm a reasonably new official, and I've never come across any sort of discussion or thought of consideration of this before. And I've observed in some competitions, perhaps other officials getting impatient or not necessarily dealing very well with these situations. Have you got any advice for how you gently integrate this into a group of officials you're working with?
I think, sorry, Shona. No, you. I was just going to say, Shona and I have worked in disability sport for a long time, and it is a slow process. You're basically chipping away at people. You're trying in a positive way, just to show good practice, to demonstrate, just making comments to encourage others to support. I haven't got a hard and fast answer, but from experience, Shona and I, in every area of athletics, it's basically like leading by example and encouraging people and supporting people when they're, if you see someone struggling with their patience or whatever, maybe if you can put it in a way that I'll support you with this. If you've got other things to deal with, I'll support you with it, that kind of thing. And then just, keeping chipping away. Would you agree, Shona? It's just a constant drip feed.
It's UK athletics do run the part of the level 4 modules, the competition management modules. There are two there's one on disability track and one on disability field. They in the last few years have opened them up to anyone to take part in a CPD, so they give you a bit more about the rules of each competition. So this year, in between January and March, the competition management workshops will be they're being delivered again over webinars this year. and they'll be able to be signed up for online. So you don't have to take part in the whole competition management. If you just want to do the workshop as CPD, then you can pick the ones you want to do. So they have one on disability field and disability track. We haven't had a UK conference for the last 3 years for COVID, unfortunately. But hopefully when one comes back again, they normally have workshops on disability track and field as well. So there are other workshops that are open. I've been involved in disability sport for I don't know how long now, and certainly from an official's point of view, there is not a lot of resources out there. And it is just a case of those that have the knowledge passing it on to others and trying to do that in a very positive manner. Integration, if you go back 10 years, even 5 years, there was very, very little integration, and now it is more and more to the forefront, which it's as it should be. And that's a battle we've been fighting for the last 20 odd years, unfortunately. There are certain people who only do disability events, and there are events that are just open for disability athletes, but the more integration we can have, then the better. And it's just trying to persuade those who have less of that positive attitude coming around to you.
And I would encourage them to, if there's any disability specific events in your area, encourage them to volunteer at that. It's so much fun. It's not the same, although they're still going by rules and things like that. It's not as strict, you know, and it just maybe opens people's eyes to what sport's about. It's about enjoying themselves, competing, achieving, and not getting too hung up on performance. Although I understand that competition is about performance as well, but maybe we just take them to that whole other side of come and join this and see, you know, how the para competitions work as well. So
they are so much more rewarding if you've ever been to a para competition. The feeling you get as an official having taken part is far superior to a mainstream competition, and to see that integration now is just fantastic. I mean, from my point of view, who's been involved for a long time and who's worked on this stuff for a long time, it's great to see so many who are interested. And just by tonight, you know, we have what 17 on this call, on this workshop. Is fantastic to see so many taking part and who are interested. And we just need to.
If you think 17 of you going out and sharing that to 1, 2, 3 people, then that's, you know, that's the effect we want to have. So
yeah.
Just on Jackie's point on the chat, the phone number is assistant, not the actual athlete. That's so if someone like has a learning disability or a speech and language difficulty, it's probably more appropriate that we speak to their assistant rather than them. And yeah, if they're looking for assistance, it probably, you could assume that they need someone there to support them, even with any pre-competition information and stuff. I don't know if there's plans, Ian, to use the assistance form across the UK. It's something we've been using in Scotland and kind of refined a wee bit over the last year, apart from our inconsistent language. But there are,
I mean, at an international level, there are different forums. They do have their own forums. I mean, if you've ever been at a para event, certainly Paralympics, there was forums that if an athlete needed their block set, there is a set forum that you can put down the measurement of the blocks. There's also one for field events. If an athlete needs their run-up measured for them, then there's a picture of a long jump and they can mark on the distance that they need measured. So at the international events, there are international forums, so that they are a little bit different. What ours is a generic forum, so the athlete can put down what their needs are. So we're trying to make it even more open. I mean, in some cases, it's just a case they need help through the call room, and once they're out onto the start line, they're fine. So they would be, within Scotland, allowed an assistant to take them through the call room, just so that they're kept in a calm situation. Certainly some athletes with a learning disability, being in a call room is too loud, it's too noisy, they would struggle, so they might have headphones on. They just have that assistant who takes them through, gets them to the start line, and then the assistant is leaves the track and the athlete's left to get on with it for there. So it's whatever the athlete needs. We're trying to be as open as we can to involve them. If it's a visual impairment, it's maybe just you're putting another lane and they have their guide, who their guide's going to be with them anyway. Earlier we talked about I can't remember who put it in the chat, about the gun, the electronic gun now, yes, can be a challenge for hearing impaired. We have been trying to work with UK. In Scotland, we have a light system, which is a little box can be put in every individual lane for the athlete. So it's like traffic lights. So when they say on your marks, it goes to green, set it goes to yellow, red, yellow, green. So it's on your marks as red, yellow for set, and then when the gun goes, it automatically goes to green, and the athlete has that visual aid so they can start the race at the same time as the other athletes. We've video tested it. We've tested it before to finish, and the reactions are identical. So that works well in Scotland. I'm trying to work with UK to say that why can't we have that for all competitions? It doesn't matter if you have a hearing impairment or you don't, then if you've got a wee box in your lane, what difference does it make? You would still have the sound of the electronics, but you'd also have the light. So it would be a fair start for everyone.
If I can add to that, it's based on my experience as an athlete. I said athlete, I use that word loosely. But I've had to speak to starters during this season, just to say with the electronic one, it's just out of that frequency range for me. And they've just moved another person about 20 yards down the line so I can see them.
Yeah.
And they've given me a signal to go, but they've also moved the speaker directly behind me.
Yeah.
So I've got the double whammy to go. But without speaking to them first and having that 2-minute conversation, that wouldn't have happened. That's
right. And that's the whole point of the assistance forum. If that's all you need, then that can be done, as long as everyone knows about it. So, and that is the other key, that the forum might come into the office or the people who are taking the entries, and it's making sure that that information gets out to the people who need it on the field of play. So if it's on the track or if it's on the field, then that forum needs to go out. I mean, some athletes just need reassurance that some of your learning disabilities, they've measured their long jump run up, but they know that what the figure is in the tape, but they're not sure if they've put their block in the right place. So they might just need you to check that for them. So it's making sure that you know that, or if you have an athlete, just check. Some of them you don't know they've got a disability until they come and speak to you. So it's just being as open as you can and as helpful as you can. But I would hope that most officials are like that with all athletes, not just athletes with disabilities, but they're with that with all athletes. But some things take a little bit longer to get through. So we just keep chipping
here. I haven't got a hands up thing, so I'm gonna have to chip in. Can I ask you on can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Whereabouts are the lights positioned that you were talking about, that integrated, you're looking at testing with UKA integrated with the new start guns? Yep. Where physically are the lights in the lanes?
So the light can be put just in front of the athlete's blocks. So it would just be behind the line, and they would be looking just between their arms. So it would be just behind the start line.
Thanks. Thank you.
Any other questions, guys? Any burning issues? No? I'd just like to thank you for your time tonight. Hopefully you did get something out of this. As I say, my email address is on the Scottish Athletics website. If you want any more information, just drop me an email. Pamela's the same. Her email address is on the website, and we're happy and open to to help anyone that we can. If it's a competition organizer that needs a little bit help or support to help integrate, then we're more than happy to give help and advice out there. I'm not saying we know it all. As I say, nobody knows it all. We're all learning all the time, and things progress. But hopefully, as we go forward, we can go forward in a more integrated fashion across the board and across the UK. So what we do in Scotland is not specific to Scotland. We're happy to share it with the other home countries, and likewise they share stuff with us. So the disability inclusion training was a partnership with Disability Sport England as well, and all the other disability organisations within England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. So that's been a good resource that's been out there for a little while now, and it just helps. So that's me. So no questions, no, we're all happy. And I know you're all going to now rush out and either look at the rule book or whatever. So it is there, as I say, it is a guide, and all rule books are a guide. Remember, common sense should always play a part. but the rule book is your guide to making things happen for the athletes, whether that's mainstream or athletes with a disability. So, and I tend to officiate up and down the country at times. So if you ever want to talk to me about it face to face, then just feel free to come in. I might forget your face or your name, but do come and speak to me and say, remember, we were on that webinar, and just ask any questions. Happy to have a chat about disability. It's one of my passions, has been for a long time now. And I think once you start doing disability events, it's very difficult to not be part of that. So yeah, just enjoyable place to be, just like all athletics. So thank you for your time. I'll let you all go and get your tea or have a cuppa, whatever it's time. And hopefully you did cope with the accents between Pamela and myself. It wasn't too bad.
Thanks very much, Shona, and thank you to Pamela as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
No problem. Bye.
Thanks very much, Shona. Bye.
You're welcome, Camille.